All our equipment is on, and we're ready to go for segment 2. It's, as they say in hockey, a line change here almost, except we're not. We must be a penalty killing in some fashion, Brian, because we're a man or a woman short. But you're person enough to handle this. Brian Newbert, Alan Karpik here. That was probably one of the stranger opens we've had. I want to also say thank you to our sponsors, because I know Kyle did this already in segment 1, but Triple X Basham Reynolds, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and Hilton Garden Inn for our sponsors as we are winding down our 2013-14 show list. We've got 2 or 3 shows, I think, still remaining. We'll have one all through spring practice. So I'm going to get to a question. Brian, Purdue's men's basketball team came to an end yesterday. And
Yeah.
not the program, just the season.
Yeah.
And that was and obviously we can go back and watch your post game wrap and get your talk about their feelings about that. But certainly, having slept on it or slept not that much on it, any great feelings or any great revelations after the loss yesterday?
Well, I didn't really sleep on it. I don't think about it all the time.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's just, I mean, kind of all the same stuff we've been talking about the last couple weeks. Obviously, Purdue has to get this fixed. This isn't what Purdue's accustomed to. I think there's some shock factor here involved because you haven't seen Purdue hit this sort of level in a long time. Obviously, back in the mid-2000s, it got pretty bad. There were a lot of reasons for that. But Purdue had a better team this year than it played. I think Purdue had good players this season. I don't think it had a good team, and I think a lot of things went into that. I think some individual players really had to grow up. I think, obviously, the way Matt Painter coaches obviously hasn't taken to this team quite yet, as it didn't last year. And you kind of look at it, and it's like, well, these were 2 very different rosters these past 2 seasons, too. So this is 2 pretty different teams the last 2 years that just couldn't the Purdue style, so to speak, just didn't stick to for whatever reason. Whether that was the coaching, whether that was the players involved. I guess we'll kind of find out next season when a lot of those common denominator players are gone, but obviously Purdue has to get this fixed. So the players coming back in the program really have to take a step forward, both as players and I guess as people. And to a certain extent, I think the coaches have to, obviously be the first to tell you they have to do a better job getting these guys ready to play hard, play smart. That was kind of the mantra after the game yesterday, and putting these guys, for whatever their issues are, in better positions to succeed.
You only have next year, and obviously it's time to start looking at that right now. And with Jay Simpson being gone, and the fact there are no seniors, there will be no seniors on next year's team. Are we going to be in the same spot next year? I mean, it's going to be still tough for this team to in a competitive Big Ten league, and we don't know how the freshmen are going to come in and how well they're going to play. We don't know if there are any other X factors out there, but it's not going to be just like, well, we just have to fix a couple things to get this turned around to be all of a sudden be back to being 22-8.
Right. Obviously, what was interesting about this year's team was that, from a chronological standpoint, from an experience standpoint, this wasn't really a young team. It was a very new team.
Right.
Simply because they had 4 seniors, but 2 of them were obviously in their first year in the program. So you had a lot of guys who hadn't played in the program before. You're going to be in the exact same position next year, too. You're not going to have any seniors. You have 5 freshmen coming in now. Obviously, sheer numbers alone tell you that those 5 guys are going to have to contribute in some capacity, or at least a couple of them are. Obviously, we don't know what sort of toll attrition might take. There's always the possibility somebody could transfer out, somebody could make a premature jump to another level of play. I don't anticipate that happening, but it's always a possibility. So you have to kind of see how the roster shakes out now. But Purdue, for the 3rd year in a row, is going to be a pretty new team, if not I guess you can call next year's team probably a young team with no seniors and 5 freshmen coming in. So, I guess it'll be 3 for 3 on new teams coming in and this, this style of play Purdue wants to play, sticking or not sticking to that particular group of personnel.
Question about Basil Smotherman. Unless you found out today, a deep bone bruise, but any more on his condition?
He didn't know in the locker room afterwards. He just banged it on somebody. They said they were going to get it checked out today. I'm unaware of any sort of prognosis there. It's certainly, at the time it might have looked a little bit serious. After the game, it didn't look particularly serious.
Yeah, he was walking around certainly on the sidelines. It did seem maybe worse than it was. I thought it was, because I think it was Aaron Kraft, it was almost like a head to kneecap type.
It's always
deal.
Kraft.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Purdue,
crashing
as
into
Purdue
people.
Purdue learned the hard way again on a Thursday afternoon. It is always Kraft. But, I think one of the things that's interesting, too, is it is simple with this program to go back and look at an Aaron Kraft or a Chris Kramer, two similar type players. Is it truly a toughness factor? I mean, what changes this down the road, do you think? I mean, what are the things that you absolutely have to change? You can't defend the way Purdue is defended. Nobody talks about that as much, it seems, as much as offense. But how do you view that? I mean, what specifically do you think? What would you have changed first?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can pinpoint any one or two things. I think blame for what's happened the last few years goes to everybody. I think that's pretty obvious. Anytime you're last place in your league, I don't think it's fair to say anybody did a particularly good job. I do think, there are some guys from a maturity standpoint, and I know we've said this for the second year in a row, but I think it still rings true, really kind of have to grow up. I think the collective personality of this team is kind of a casual, sort of quiet sort of team, when the teams that have won at Purdue in the modern era have been urgent, they've been loud, they've been overt, and I don't think this team from a personality standpoint has jibed very well with the way Matt Painter and his coaching staff coach, and just the identity Purdue wants to adhere to. So I think that's a big part of it. Obviously, you have some personnel shortcomings. You had two sophomores this year, Ronnie Johnson and A.J. Hammonds, who have the potential to be really, really good players. All Big Ten sort of performers who took steps this year, but didn't take that quantum leap maybe some of us figured experience alone would help them make. I think A.J. Hammonds, his best basketball is still way ahead of him. I think Ronnie Johnson, too, the same can be said for him. Also, I think there was probably a little bit of a void of leadership. Anytime you have so many young guys and so few, or I'm sorry, I keep using the word young when I really mean new, because you had the two seniors coming in too. I just think, Purdue didn't have those existing presences in the program. You had so many recruiting classes just blown out basically by attrition, that you were left in this position where Tyrone Johnson and Travis Carroll are really your only two returning seniors, and Travis Carroll really, didn't play very much. There's only so much he can do from an example in game standpoint, and then you obviously didn't have any juniors either. So when you only have two upperclassmen, returning upperclassmen in your whole program, you obviously are looking for, you're kind of void of those people who can set examples and sort of lead. I think Rayfeld Davis really took a step toward that sort of role late in the season. Sterling Carter had as well, obviously, before he got hurt.
A few questions, certainly, from those calling for Purdue needing to clean house, which is not going to happen, I don't think, in the near term, if you're talking about the coaching staff. But the changing of the mantra from playing hard to playing smart, and the fact that this Matt Painter talked a lot about this team's inability to make good decisions at the right time, not just turning the ball over, but the way they turn the ball over. Is it as simple as that? I mean, in terms of just a basketball IQ situation, do you think, as much as anything, if you were going to pick something that if they make this change next year, this will show improvement?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously part of it. Now, the play hard and play smart thing, they're not mutually exclusive from one another. It's the need to play hard and smart. Painter said he thought that they played hard yesterday, but they didn't play smart, and that that's not all that groundbreaking. Sometimes when guys are more urgent, which you want to see, sometimes maybe as he always says, they jump over the fight, so to speak. I thought Ronnie Johnson came out and played pretty hard yesterday in the first half, especially ends the game with 7 turnovers. A lot of those are turnovers that just sometimes happen, but that's still way too many turnovers for Purdue to be committing. The turnovers, by sheer numbers, I think they committed the most turnovers in the Big Ten, aside from only Minnesota and Indiana. But when you look at Purdue's turnovers, it wasn't the volume, it was the impact. They had a lot of turnovers this year that led directly to points, and the same thing happened last year. And you had a lot of untimely turnovers, just like they did yesterday. They turned the ball over a couple times, just sloppy turnovers in the last minutes of the game. One of those goes the other way, Purdue might be playing right now. So that's probably a function of a little inconsistency with your primary ball handlers. Last year was definitely a function of youth. This year it was probably a combination thereof.
You had a chance for the opportunity on the night before to go see Vince Edwards play down in Cincinnati. Talk a little bit, what did you see there with him? And obviously his season came to an end, a tough situation for him. But go through the guys coming in and maybe the contributions that you see, the ones that you've seen the most of, what they can do for this program sooner than later.
Okay, I'll kind of go lightning round here on all five of them. Vince Edwards, smart, substantive basketball player. He will pass the ball. He will understand the game pretty well. I wouldn't expect him to be a star right away. I think he gives you, some of that skill at the 4 position where he can handle the ball, make decisions, make the occasional jump shot, but also play with his back to the basket and be rugged as a rebounder. I think that's a component of the game right now. Purdue kind of lacked. Eric Peck could do some things offensively, but obviously some things held him back this year from being that 30-minute-a-game guy. Dakota Mathias, kind of the same thing. He can make all kinds of jump shots. He's very smart, very studious, has a great passion for basketball. Those intangibles in themselves will be a positive addition for Purdue. But I wouldn't anticipate him being a lockdown defender right away in his Purdue career, nor would I expect him to probably be a lockdown defender at any point in his Purdue career. I think athleticism and foot speed are going to be things he's going to have to overcome defensively. Isaac Haas, obviously, I think he's a guy you don't want to have to rush out there. Ideally, if you figure you have A.J. Hammonds back, he's going to log the bulk of your minutes at the 5, provided he can keep out of foul trouble. Isaac Haas might be able to come in and give you those backup minutes. Now you need him to play because Jay Simpson's gone. Haas, obviously, you don't have to tell you what he represents out there, being 7'2", 270 pounds, big physical presence on the boards, big physical rim protector more than anything. We'll see how he translates athletically. We'll see how he translates offensively. Haven't seen enough of him to this point to really tell you. Jaquil Taylor, haven't seen him at all, but the thing with A.J. Hammonds the last 2 years is having him has brought a lot of very positive things to Purdue's lineup, with his ability to block shots, be physical, take up space around the basket, his ability to score around the rim. It's also married Purdue to a certain style of play where the way they defend out on the perimeter, the way they run their offense, etc. I do think having a mobile big man, especially in the long term, can help them in some senses. Obviously, some of Purdue's best teams had a very mobile big man, albeit a very special mobile big man.
Yeah.
So that he might add an element you don't otherwise have, and then P.J. Thompson, who's not yet signed, but obviously will be here in a matter of weeks in April. I think Purdue, obviously there's a need at point guard for an extra ball handler, and we'll kind of see how things shake out from a roster perspective in terms of that need. I think you're recruiting a guy who has shown Purdue or convinced Purdue that he's going to be a very, very good team player, a very good positive personality. And I think, one thing what's kind of come about this year is you've seen a need for leadership, a need for vocality, just kind of charisma in general, just some personality. I think P.J. Thompson is right out of central casting in that sense. He's got a great personality. He's very vocal. He's a leader. He's a very positive guy. He's shown as a basketball player he can do whatever team he's playing for at the time needs him to do, whether it was scoring in bulk for his high school team and winning games with a team that otherwise probably wouldn't be winning games, or playing a bit role for his AU team, which was loaded with superstars. So I think Purdue's getting a little bit of everything in this recruiting class in terms of obviously having a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of which brings certain things. But I would caution against expecting too much right away from freshmen. I don't know if any of these guys are going to come in right away and be these transcendent, stars right away and just change Purdue by being with their sheer presence alone. I think it's more influence sort of thing and more of a complementary sort of thing.
And obviously there's been a lot of talk on with you and also on our message boards, but also the status of Ronnie Johnson. And I know that there's still, he's going to have to make a decision, assuming that that's all going in whatever direction it is. But talk about just the role of any of the what you saw from yesterday, body language, anything that jumped out at you with respect to Ronnie. I don't know.
He said all the right things. He talked right after the game about some of Purdue's frustrating losses, and he actually used the word, "I have to hold people more accountable," which indicates a player who, in this moment in time, thought it prudent to mention the need to be a leader and an actual desire to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as Painter always says, it's easy to say the right things. It's another one to do the right things. We'll see ultimately what he decides to do in terms of whether he'll stay at Purdue or not. But if he does, obviously, and he meant what he said, and he puts that into practice next year, obviously, I think that bodes well, just from the standpoint of it reflects a player who understands what he needs to do.
Yeah, and that's going to be a storyline that obviously we'll be following. Last thing, with respect to what other guys have to do, Basil Smotherman, certainly Raphael Davis gets a lot of credit for a guy being in a place that plays hard. Elevating the game, is this as simple as with a program that doesn't have a lot of numbers right now in terms of returning players? There may be enough bodies around to work out, but talk about what they have to do to make that leap. Guys, again, that we haven't talked about as much, but the Davises, the Smothermans, and those guys.
Well, I think Raphael Davis took a huge step forward at the end of the year. I thought he was the most confident he's been all year, the most aggressive he's been all year. I thought his passion really impacted Purdue. I think when you just look at his rebounding numbers alone, playing as a 6'5" 4, and I understand the way Purdue plays, it's not like he's playing that Karl Malone power forward position. He's essentially an extra wing out there. But when he goes out and gets 8 rebounds against Ohio State, when they can't keep LaQuentin Ross off the boards, that obviously speaks to effort. I think he's that ideal right now, sort of lead by example sort of guy, or at least he's growing into that ideal lead by example guy. I think as a player, obviously the more he works on his shooting, the more he works on just some of the nuances of his game, the better. We'll see where he ends up next year, because they had a lot of success late in the year. Purdue didn't have a lot of success as a team, but he played very well, moving back to that 4 role. So it'll be interesting to see what they do from a personnel standpoint and how they play next year. The roster, the complexion of the roster will tell the tale probably. You mentioned Basil Smotherman. I think he just needs to be active and athletic, and when he's active, you see his athleticism. I think when he was at his best this season, he was really, really active around the rim, on the boards. Remember how many tip-ins he had early in the season?
Right.
When he's doing little stuff like that, he's really impacting games. I think he's got a chance to be a very good defender for Purdue. I think late in the year you saw him taking good jumpers, and they started to go. He looked like he found a little bit of a rhythm there. Perhaps he can help out in that sort of capacity too in time. As when he does the fundamental stuff, like the activity around the rim, the using his athleticism sort of things, the defense, the rebounding, then things can expand from there. He can become a guy who scores a little bit more for Purdue. You didn't mention Kendall Stevens.
Yeah.
I think Kendall Stevens has a really, really bright future. He didn't have an offseason. He recovered from shoulder surgery and was sidelined for 6-7 months, whatever it was, before he got to Purdue. He didn't get cleared until damn near the fall. And he came in and he got better through the course of the year. In some ways, he got better through the course of the year. I think you saw a little bit more complete player at the end of the year than you did at the start of the year. I think you saw him make some big shots in some big situations through the year. You saw him have some very good games for Purdue. And I just think as his body wore down, he got better. And now that he has a healthy offseason, I think you're going to see him take another step forward. He's got to get stronger. He's got to round out his game more, but he'll have an opportunity to do that this summer, which he didn't have a chance to do last summer. So I think he's got a really bright future.
Well, there'll be a lot more, I'm sure, on the site here as we talk and kind of wind down the 2013-14 men's basketball season. Brian, thank you for joining us and also for all the work here over this basketball season. Not an easy one to cover from that standpoint. We're going to bring back Kyle Charters. We'll bring him down, too. Kyle Charters and Stacy Clarity. We'll talk football spring practice. The Boilermakers have been through a handful of practices to date. We'll hit that and more in our final segment on Gold and Black Live.